Oh, yeah, my kid. Oh, that was up in nursery. My son wanted to watch
Good evening, everyone. I would like to call the Monday, June 27th, 2022 Educational Operations Committee meeting to order. Agenda item number 2, I'm seeking a motion to approve the minutes of May 23rd, 2022.
So moved. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Agenda number 3. At this time, I would like to recognize speakers and students who wish to make public comments. Before we do, I'll make this comment. Do you have anyone? Okay, I'm going to make a comment first of all. Mr. Stillers. The board recognizes the value of the public comment on educational issues and importance of allowing members of the public to express themselves on district matters. Please identify yourself by name and state your address. Each statement made by a participant shall be limited to 3 minutes in duration. This will identify the time remaining to your left. Speakers shall direct all comments to the board and not to staff or other participants. Public comments may not identify specific personnel or students by name or through the use of sufficiently detailed descriptions so as to identify the individual staff or student. Presiding officer values civil discourse. And with that, Mr. Sillers.
Corey Sillers, 226-961 Crossbill Avenue, Town of Red Mountain. My daughter graduated, so now I only have one student at Wausau West. As we begin to review building and site plans for each of our schools, I stay optimistic that the district will achieve our high goals to serve our students in effective ways to continue advancing their educational opportunities. Designing for the future of our students through enhanced learning spaces, additional outdoor spaces, and creating a secure but welcoming and inviting entrances to each of our buildings. With all of our families and staff throughout the district working together, we will continue to meet our goals. I have no doubt. The only other comment is on behalf of the Wausau 16U baseball team, and that's kids from both the east and west side that weren't in the junior legion or the other legion ball. We've been able to be using the facilities at Wausau West. We've been using the JV field for our practices. And A.D. Miller and staff member Eric Brown has been very gracious in helping us to with the gate and getting access to that, making our life a little bit easier. And the team and I as a coach sincerely appreciate all of that. So with that, thank you.
Thank you very much. Agenda item number 4. We have Dr. Hiltz give us a summary on the safety and security efforts taking place right now.
Yeah, thank you. So it was suggested that maybe we should take a comprehensive look at our safety and security processes. So we did a couple of things in this agenda item. One, just want the board and the community and the staff to know that safety and security is always front of mind for us. And the reason we put together this summary list is just to let everybody know the extent to which we've already invested in our safety and security processes. I won't go through every item. People who want to see it can review it on the agenda, but suffice to say that there's a lot of not just facility planning around safety and security, but emergency planning, safety plans, a lot of training. Just this summer, already. We've had a number of staff go through threat assessment training. I think I had mentioned that at our last meeting. That has proven to be a very valuable tool in our district. When there is behavior of concern, it gives us a trained staff and a structure to really evaluate that behavior, assess any threats, and put together plans to change that any potential threat. So we've been very impressed with that. And most recently was PROACT, used to be called CPI training. And again, these are all preventative efforts in relation to safety and security. However, since safety and security is one of our top priorities, we thought it was a good idea. And so, Cassie, if you could scroll up just a little bit to the scope of the work. I'm sorry, scroll down. We would propose to seek out a firm or an individual who could help us evaluate our facilities, our processes. You see the list here. This is a proposed scope of work. It also says, if you notice, this is proposed but not necessarily limited to. If there is someone who knows something else we should be reviewing, we certainly want to know that. So we just wanted to let the board know we're interested, get the board's thumbs up to go ahead and put out a request for information. And that RFI would ask for the firms or the individual's qualifications, the manner in which they would approach this work, get some references, proposed cost structure, and we would like to do this as quickly as possible, hopefully with a deadline of mid-July. We do have a number of firms that we've sought out people in the industry who've made some recommendations to us, so we do have a list of seven now. Actually, I think we're expecting 2 more, so we would have up to 9. And if any of you happen to know of a safety and security firm or an individual, we would certainly include them in the list. And we would mail this to, or contact them with this RFI, and then review their responses.
Any questions?
No, I just want to say I'm really happy with the direction that this has gone. I advocated for this, obviously, with President Boucher, Keith, and yourself. I think there's going to be significant benefit, not that we don't already have safe buildings to your point, but with everything that's gone on, frankly, keeps going on in this day and age, there are firms out there who wake up every day, eat, sleep, and breathe this stuff, and those are the kinds of things that I think we want to tap into and make sure all the work that we're doing with the referendum buildings, is done not only efficiently, but also with the latest and greatest security in mind. So I think this is a great move.
Wonderful, thank you.
Any other comments? Well, thank you, Deputy.
We will proceed, thank you.
Keep on moving. Agenda number 5, as referendum funded improvement plans developed for each facility, the board will see updates when the designs reach 50% completion. Current plans for Sateen and Riverview elementary schools will be shared today. And with that, Mr. Tess.
Thank you. We've got one very familiar face up here, Larry Seiler, who you've seen plenty of times. We've got a guest here as well. Sharon Gould is here with us from Nexus. And you'll probably see quite a bit of Sharon over the next several months, as tonight we're going to go through the 50% design work that has been completed thus far. We're going to end up having 20 such presentations. Or if we do them 2 at a time, we'll have 10 such presentations. So you're going to get a chance to see the design as it looked during the referendum, and we'll talk a little bit about how it developed and how it morphed into where it is now. And the floor plan probably won't change too much from now until 95% when you get another look at it. Electrical, mechanical, plumbing, a lot of that stuff behind the scenes will obviously develop between now and 95%. So how about with that introduction, Sharon, that clicker in front of you is turned on. Outside there. There you go. All right, we'll take you through the slide deck.
Excellent. Well, good evening, everyone. As Bob said, I'm Sharon Gould. I'm Program Manager with Nexus Solutions. I'm overseeing the design process for the referendum project. So today we're going to go through the 50% design review for both Riverview and Sateen, and give you a high-level overview of where we are right now. So with that, I have a quick agenda, and we do have time for questions as well. So I just put on the slide the concept of the referendum drawings here for your reference, so you can see what was shown to the public in the beginning. So just to show you, we've been meeting with the district staff. We've had many meetings over the course of design. We're halfway through. And so we've had 4 design meetings to date, which is the district leadership team and the building design committee, which also includes the principal and maintenance of the building. So on top of that, we also dug in deep to learn a little bit more on how these buildings are working, and we included, in the user group meetings, we had 3 of those teachers who are 4th and 5th grade teachers that meet the scope of Sateen. So I have here a copy of the site plan, so you can see this is rotated a little bit, so true north is on the top. We rotate things around in design just to help fit on the sheets and things like that, so you can see the 6 classroom addition is up top, and then part of it is we did move the playground down to the bottom of the hill. We worked with the user groups and district staff to be able to identify the best location for that, and you can see in the dark gray rectangle towards the bottom of the screen is the location of the displaced playground. So that is an ADA access ramp to get us down to the bottom playground. So the floor plan's consistent with the referendum drawings, and as details come out, we make sure that we answer those questions. So just to show, I have a little key plan in the corner that has orange areas of work of what we're doing. This is the major renovation and new addition. So the larger plan is a 6 classroom addition to get a 3-section school. We provide 2 resource rooms. We have boys and girls toilet rooms, so the counts all work with the students that the area serves. We provided a workroom that's going into is there a pointer on
Yeah, it is, but the screen will.
here? Okay, so anyway, on the corner of the room corner by the mechanical room, we'll be putting in a workroom to help tighten up the space. And then in the lower left-hand corner, we have where we are to date on the secure front entrance, also probably incorporating any feedback that we hear from what you were discussing earlier. So just some quick renderings. We have a rendering of the new addition. We put a lot of effort in to make sure it's tying into the existing part of the building, so you can see the vestibule on the back has similar architectural detailing, and we're just getting started with matching the brick to make sure it ties in with the existing building. The goal is to make it look like, as much as reasonable, that it's always been part of the school, knowing that sometimes we have to do a little bit to tie it back in. I also included the typical classroom casework and the typical cubby layout for the students. We got great teacher feedback from that as well, just to make sure that the cubbies and the casework are consistent with the rest of the building. So the casework, getting feedback from the other parts of the school, we wanted to make sure that we were hearing how they were using, incorporating what worked, and that's the elevations that you can see here. We're just getting started on mechanical, electrical, and plumbing systems. This covers, at the 50% is about when the floor plan settles down and we get started on getting those folks involved. And there's a lot of items that we've not talked about yet on this slideshow, but that's mostly in the mechanical, electrical, and plumbing scope of work, so you'll hear more about those extra safety systems, fire alarm, things like that at the 95% review. So next is Riverview, going through a similar process where we have the referendum concept drawing here. You can see in green the new addition for 2 classrooms, and other things, it's in light blue. You can see the secure front entry, and then there's other safety and security measures that go into the building, like a new generator and things like that. So this one, we had the same number of design meetings with the same folks involved, but we had more specific teachers involved based on, this one has a little bit of a change. Based on the flow of the building, we actually, you'll see this in the next couple of slides, we moved the addition to a different location. And so we did bring in the teachers that were most affected by the new addition location, because that made the most sense. So here you are, if you look at the site plan, you can see the new addition. It doesn't have the whole site on here, but we moved the addition from the east side of the site to the west side of the site. And there's a couple benefits for doing this. One, it has a little bit more efficient flow of the corridors, the space. It's a smaller footprint, so it's more cost effective. It actually provides more security to the playground, because if you're familiar with the site, there's a lot of access from the street over there, and the new building will help deter cross flow from the street into the playground area. We also, I just wanted to point out too, is this is on the southwest side of the building, and there's some tennis courts nearby. And while the building is not going on the tennis courts, we did get a lot of feedback from the user groups and district staff that by putting it here, the tennis courts, we were given permission to remove the tennis court. So we'll return that to a grassy field. And one of the staff members lives in the neighborhood and, you know, has personal observation on how often those tennis courts are used. So we did try to do good research to make sure that we were being thorough in making a decision like that. So with that, I'm showing you the floor plan again. You can see the orange areas are the areas of work, and so I highlight the 2 classrooms. We have 2 resource rooms, 2 mechanical rooms, and we're gonna turn one of the mechanical rooms into storage because the mechanical's just getting started, and we're trying to be more efficient with the space and incorporate their feedback into the design. And also, we're working on this building secure furniture as well, you know, looking for the feedback that we'll get from the RFI. Areas of work include that we're getting started with mechanical, electrical, plumbing. We are going to be providing a new generator on site, so we're still working on a site location for that. And then just to show the screen, we have another rendering of the new addition, tying back into the old, doing our best to, you know, align the architecture so it doesn't, you know, blend in with the existing building. And you can see there's a firewall there which might look a little bit interesting, but that's part of the code compliance to get the addition to work. So again, we're showing you the casework and the cubbies to know the cabinetry fits for all the, you know, the existing building, the classrooms, and the cubby counts. You know, we did spend time with the teachers to make sure the cubby counts were working, and the cubby design is what they were looking for. Any questions?
Anyone?
Just one, on the Sateen secure entrance, can you elaborate a little bit on, because we have a secure entrance now, or you have to be buzzed in. Can you explain a little bit what the enhancements would be absent of any consultant information? Because I think it's important for people to understand what else is going to be done.
So I just went back to the security, if you look at the lower left-hand corner, what we're doing is we're adding in a new door to help with the flow, and we're actually blocking off, if you look, you can see.
You want me to be your pointer?
Yeah.
All right.
Thank you.
Yeah, so we're coming in here.
You come in there,
Yep.
and then you buzz into the office to indicate your presence.
Which is down here. Right, we buzz
Right,
in
so
first.
then you turn right and go into that door. Once they buzz you in, then you do the Raptor system, and they check and everything like that. And then they release if you go just to the north there, and then they buzz you into the building. So what we're changing also is we're adding a door and moving some of the front office. You know, we have a new reception desk, and if you go to the door at the end of the hallway to the back office,
Are you looking
just
down
up. No,
here?
Hallway.
up the hallway.
Pointer?
Okay, I'll figure it, just tell me.
It's door number 3, but you don't know my
Door
door
number
number.
3, no, no.
The end of the hallway.
It's between the reception desk and the hallway.
Oh, here.
Yeah, that door,
Thank you.
we're adding that door in because if you were to zoom out and look at the whole floor plan, you can see like 4 or 5 doors going from the office into the rest of the building. And so we created a secure line to make sure that that secure line was intact and that there was no back doors out. So you can see also the principal has a back door as well. And so we're working through the protocols to be able to lock down the back doors so someone can't like sneak through the office and get into the school that way. So we're doing that with all the different schools to make sure that there's language out there like that they're either contained in the front vestibule or a secondary contained in the office area without being able to get into the school without a lot of hassle. So hassle being, you know, they need to break a door down, or like it just slows them down and gives everybody else more time to react.
And for folks who aren't familiar, currently, if you're out here and you buzz in, once you come into, you have full access to to the whole school, so that's the whole purpose of bringing them in through the office.
That's great, yes,
Yeah.
thank you.
And we're trying to be very consistent with the architecture to make, and the security hardware, cameras, things like that, so they're all run, we're limited with the existing space sometimes, but we're doing our best to make sure that we're hitting all the priorities.
I think that's a very, very important fact that you just pointed out, how it is right now.
Yeah.
Because of the fact that once you got in through the first doors, you're able to go anywhere.
Yeah, and we've always said more secure and more welcoming. So now, we just talked about the secure piece, but the welcoming piece as well. So now when you come in, you only have one place to go. It's to the office, to a person who's going to, vet you, but also help you if you need to know where you have to go, take care of all the Raptor, the background checks. So yeah, it's going to be a superior design.
Does everybody know what the Raptor hardware software is? No?
Sure. So yeah, so if any visitor comes to the school, you just show them your driver's license, or I think they have other IDs now, but they run that and it does a background check on the individual. And it does a couple things. It does the background check, it also checks them in, prints out a sticky name tag with their photo, says generally where they're going. So if I see them walking through the school, I know who they are, I know it's the right person, I know where they're going. And then they also come back into the office, I believe, to then check out. So we know that if, we know who is in the building and where they are at all times.
I remember now, I had to go through that when I visited the
Yes.
schools, and I
Mhm.
couldn't check in at another school because I was still checked in at a different school.
There you go, yep.
So now I know it.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yep, mm-hmm.
Any other questions? Otherwise, go ahead.
Can you explain just a little bit more about that secondary playground at Sateen? So those new classrooms, I'm assuming are kind of coming out onto where those basketball courts and stuff are?
Correct.
So is that then what is being placed down here at the lower level, at the bottom of the hill?
Yes, at this point, we're replicating it, we're putting in the 2 hoops and moving the games down, but we do have a question out to the principal. We'll paint some games on the asphalt down there, and just to make sure that those games are the 4 square and a couple of the other ones are indeed what she's looking for.
Got it. And then that long slender is just like the access?
Mhm.
Okay.
So I'm sure, I'm not a teacher, so the kids might run down the hill, don't quote me.
Slide.
The path is allowed for all people to get down to the bottom successfully.
field stays.
The baseball field stays, so we are into the soccer field, and we did discuss back and forth about that, and so there might be other options. But it was really important to make sure that we kept the integrity of the playgrounds that we're displacing.
Even the one back one would kind of reveal, or forward back, if you slide back with a slide or 2. That kind of reveals what we're dealing with too. You can see how that new addition landed on top of a significant part of the playground.
So the equipment, the playground equipment then still stays where it is, it's just that, that asphalt space with the basketball hoops and primarily that's getting moved.
Yeah, the only equipment we're actually interfering with is the basketball hoops,
Okay.
and so everything else is painted on the asphalt. And so the play sets and structures we're not interfering with those.
Very interesting.
Thank
Let
you.
us continue here. Agenda item number 6, consistent with what was shared with the community prior to the referendum vote, plans are developing for the construction of a new street that connects the end of Kickbush Street with Washington Street. In order to design, construct, and eventually convey ownership of the street to the city, it will be necessary to coordinate all required developer agreements and ownership transfer documents between the city and the district. As the timeline determined by the city develops, the board will continue to be informed of the district's obligations. So, continue.
Thank you. We've got a small slide deck for this one, and this isn't quite 50%, so this one looks a little bit different. We wanted to get in front of you a little bit earlier, because at Hawthorne, you'll recall, from the referendum discussion, we also included construction of a road that goes around the back and connects with Washington. Obviously, a lot of engineering design work going with that, but also collaboration with the city. So we're collaborating already with the city, but we have to formalize that in a couple of different steps with their committee level and with their ultimate city council to convey ownership. And maybe Larry has a word or two to say about the timeline and what we'll be coming to you and asking you for, because the city will ask us, and we really can't give away property, and we can't transact with the city. That's necessary for the board to do that. So Larry, maybe you can add something on this one.
Okay, so the slide that we're looking at right now is what we saw in the referendum. So what we landed on is going to look a little different than this due to the topography, and I'm sure everybody's familiar. There's a very big steep hill wrapping around the back of the school. So again, this is twisted a little bit. So on the right-hand side, you'll see where it comes off of Kickbush and follows the grade to the extent we're able so that we eliminate as much cutting and filling as we can. Obviously, there's expense involved in that. And we were also keeping in mind potential future expansions so that we didn't do something that would prevent or inhibit us from completing those expansions at some point in the future. We have been working with the city. The initial plan actually was sketched, I guess, by the city. This was done by our engineers, REI. Certainly not final, but again, trying to keep as much cutting and filling as possible and maintaining a path and a grade that's acceptable to the city so that we don't end up with a really sharp hill that everybody's gonna go sliding down in the winter. The thing that Bob mentioned, we put the city in sort of a weird position because typically this sort of work is done by a developer. They've never really encountered where another entity such as a school district has brought this sort of work to them. So we're sort of helping them and they're helping us feel our way through what's the correct process for transitioning the land. So that developer's agreement that Bob mentioned is really the tool they would normally use with a developer. And what that tool or that language, that document does is basically outlines all the rights and responsibilities of the parties. In a nutshell, it says the school district is going to build and design a road that meets all the districts, or excuse me, all the city's requirements as far as curb and gutter and lights and utilities and things of that nature. And then at the end of that, assuming we've done all that, the city would assume ownership of that street, and then obviously all the ongoing maintenance that will result from owning another street. We are also working with them on stormwater retention because anytime you put a paved or an impervious surface in, you need to create additional stormwater retention. Working with them to perhaps, maybe, this is a big maybe, put it across the street in Pfaff Park. I stumbled on that one. And we're also talking about, there's another right-of-way, you see that kind of a curve there? That's actually an existing right-of-way that the city has, because at some point, the street was going to wrap through that right-of-way, almost close to impossible without making it extraordinarily steep. So through this process, probably later in the process, we're going to, or the city is going to relinquish that right-of-way and just retain easements for utilities that are running through there. Any questions on the plan or the process?
If I can add one more point, Larry, regarding timing and how time is of the essence. We don't know exactly how this is gonna unfold because it's the committee of the city and the city council. If the timing is perfect, the city could present us with something that we could just take to you and you could offer approval on. If the timing is anything other than that, we might need to come to you and ask you to give us the authority to execute an agreement. And it'll all depend on the timing. If the timing is tight, we may need to go to you and say, give us the authority to give this property to the city or execute the developer's agreement. So we'll see how this timing unfolds with the city and we'll react accordingly.
I have just one question pertaining to the safety and security for our students and our staff while all of this construction is going on. I'm curious about the process that we're going to be going through, because obviously you're cutting roads out, you're taking trees down, you're putting all the underlings there, and that's going to take a while, I would imagine, probably a year and a half.
So the hope was to begin the construction of this fall, assuming all the pieces fall in place in time to do that, so that a lot of that rough construction is done before we hit road limits in the spring, which sort of brings that type of construction to a screeching halt. But I'm sure Nexus has gone through this a number of times, but there is typically fencing around the construction site to ensure that, you know, students can't just inadvertently wander in there and look at a bulldozer or some big piece of equipment and look at it as, you know, the big toy, I'd like to go play on that. So that happens. Any facilities that the contractors need to use, restrooms, outhouses, things like that, are provided by the contractor, so we don't have contractors literally coming in the building, you know, just to go to the bathroom, that sort of thing. So typically, students, staff, and contractors really shouldn't cross paths other than literally passing on the street. Correct me if I'm wrong with the process.
One thing to add, and like many things we're very pleased with Nexus, is their safety record and their attention to safety. We've witnessed it on our own with projects they've managed. We've seen it from other districts and talked to other districts. And safety is a huge priority for them. They've been with us before on this site, as a matter of fact, where we've had to use dynamite. It's an example. And we're impressed with how the importance they put on safety, and we obviously share that same priority, so.
Well, I bring that up only because I'm sure people are thinking about it, and I know through construction in the past that I've been a part of, it's a very big concern, and it is very difficult, and teachers are always concerned about making sure that it's still a learning environment, et cetera, et cetera. So, you know, I'm sure Nexus has gone through this, but it is good for us to know what those plans are in case anybody asks us, and hopefully they will be getting the answers here.
And we can come in and have a safety discussion in a future board meeting to let you know what the action. My expertise is more on the design side, but we can have our construction management team come in and give you an update on how that would go forward once we get to that point in the project.
If there's dynamite, let us know, because we want to do a field trip.
Levity is good. Levity is good. Okay, if there are no other questions, we'll continue on. All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Agenda item number 7, contracts for referendum design and construction. As the design process for referendum-funded projects continue to develop, it will be necessary to have a pair of AIA, American Institute of Architects, contracts between the district and Nexus Solutions to define the work and clearly delineate all responsibilities the administration has engaged. I'm sure legal counsel to assist all the review of the development of all AIA design and construction management contracts between the district and Nexus Solutions. That work continues, and administration asks for approval to negotiate and finalize all AIA contracts with Nexus Solutions. So with that, I'm seeking a motion to authorize administration to work with legal counsel to negotiate and finalize all AIA contracts with Nexus Solutions for design and construction management services for referendum-related work.
So moved.
Second.
Questions? Any questions for administration at this point in time?
So what you're asking for tonight, excuse me, is board approval to engage in the negotiation of those contracts. Legal counsel is involved and is going to help with the review of the AIA contracts. Will you be, well, let me back up. I think that the board should have to approve whatever is agreed upon between us and Nexus. So not just authorizing you to negotiate in it, but once you finalized it, bring them back to the board for review and let us approve them formally.
Approve the contract itself?
Yes.
We could do that. Certainly, that's within the, you know, the board's authority. Does that create any timeline issues?
We should be okay with the timeline. As a matter of fact, we can do one of two things. We can rewrite the motion to do that and present the contract itself, that we not only had legal counsel review, but also help us negotiate, right? So help us negotiate and review, and we can bring it to you written that way, or we can bring a motion looking very much like this while you look at the contract itself. So you would have a chance to view the contract and still give us the authority to execute the contract while you review it, or review the contract and then insist on you executing the contract itself. We can do either way, because we will have the contract ready for you on July 11th. Either way, we're gonna let you look at it.
Okay, but it doesn't become, in this scenario, it wouldn't become official until we approve it.
Either way, it won't.
Okay.
I'll probably change the word to execute the contract and allow you to look at it, and then give us the permission to execute it, or allow you to look at it and you execute it yourself. We
What is
could actually make that-
anticipated, what's the anticipated dollar volume of these? How is that calculated?
I can't guess on that. You could probably guess, let's see, 15 million.
15?
Yeah.
Okay.
Probably something in that neighborhood, but there's gonna be language in there that delineates reimbursable expense and things of that nature, so it's not gonna be a hard, fast dollar amount.
Understood, I'm trying to figure out, is it 50 grand or 15 million? Okay.
Yep.
So we're asking you to get this prepared for the total board coming up in 2 weeks. So are we thinking there should be a word change here, or as you were saying, Mr. Tess?
Either way, there's gonna be a change in the recommended motion, because it will include the word execute, most notably. And we can even make that change on the fly during the July 11th meeting. If you review the contracts and you want to execute it, we can change the motion quite easily on the fly. Or if you review all the contracts and you want to give us the authority to execute, as we've done in the past, with other referendum, we can do that. And it'll be an easy decision to change during the board meeting if you really would like.
Do we need to define, when you say execute the contract, just want to make
Sign
sure
it.
everybody just sign it?
Sign the contract
Yep.
as it was prepared and negotiated with our legal counsel. And us.
Any other questions pertaining to this?
And we've been with legal counsel throughout this process. They're not reviewing it at the very end. We've been working with them through this process.
Who are we using for that?
Board clerk.
All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Agenda item number 8, we're talking about contract policy. I'm going to just ask for discussion at this point in time and not ask for a motion, and let Mr. Tess take us down that road. Or is it Mr. Tess or?
No, I think for, Pat
Yeah.
had requested to discuss this, so, yeah, interested to hear.
Yeah, so it really just kind of dovetails with what we just talked about. Currently, at least I didn't find in the policies that we have in place today, specifically the purchasing, section 63, 20, 63, 40, something to that effect, where contracts over X dollar amount, we don't require any legal review currently. So the district can enter into any agreement, execute it, and it does not have to pass through our attorney's hands for a potential review, nor is it required that the board actually approves any of those contracts as we move forward. And what I'm suggesting is, or recommending, I guess, is that we incorporate a policy or language into the policy, which apparently exists already with Neola, because I've pulled some districts that have much more detailed policies than what we have. But my recommendation would be that for contracts over a dollar amount, I mean, there's a common one I found was $50,000, that we would require legal review / sign off, as well as formal board approval before those contracts were in fact executed. I don't have specific verbiage. There was a lot of, like I said, there's a lot out there. Interestingly enough, I did find that some districts actually put out their administrative guidelines, which is a separate section of the Neola software out there. So that's a different discussion, but I just thought it would be good practice going forward if we had those two additional parts to the contract negotiating process and execution.
I would think something for us to discuss and think about would be that dollar amount. Smaller districts may have $50,000 for the administration to make a decision on and just go forward on that. Some others have $100,000, up to $100,000 to just make that decision. Anything above has to go in front of the board. For a school district our size, I'm not sure what the amount should be. And that would be the discussion point that I think you would want to have, Ms. McKee.
Sure, I mean, we could have it right now.
Okay.
I don't have that 6320 in front of me, but I think that has reference to $25,000 for purchases, I believe, and services.
Right, any one purchase order of 25,000 or more, I think, to a single vendor.
So I don't know if we would need to have a different dollar amount for any other types of contracts. If we have $25,000 for purchases and services, I don't know if we would need to have a different dollar amount. It'd be interesting to see some of the policy examples that you've seen, or if Neola has a sample that addresses it, so that we're not trying to start from scratch.
Yeah, they're
Or randomly grabbing numbers right there.
Right.
Yeah, and again, the intent, I'm not as concerned about the $25,000 ones as I am the $15 million ones and whatnot. So whatever that number ends up being, I think we could arrive at some reasonable agreement, whether it's 50, 100, 150, kind of arbitrary to me at this point.
So there's a way to find, you know, what are common checks that we're releasing, like obviously you wouldn't want to interfere with the lunch folks buying food for the kids or, you know,
Right.
that's not the point of it, it's larger purchases. But I do agree, just having that check and balance is certainly not gonna hurt us.
I would just add, we have there are some contracts we have there with, like ongoing service providers, like a first student, like a, you know, curriculum. Would those still, do you think, is the board interested in seeing those as well? I'm
Like
just,
first student, we do see. That was one
Have
of
they?
the.
That was a 5-year contract.
Yeah.
and you
Okay.
see that.
Okay.
There's some that it's pretty obvious, food service, for example, if you were gonna hire a food service provider, that's statutorily required, you have to have that by the board.
Bob,
So,
sorry.
thank you.
Yeah, okay.
You're right, first student is a 5-year contract and you will see that. And I just ran our purchase services, our 300 level Wolfer codes. And I've got real quickly up to 50 vendors for purchase services. You find 50 pretty quickly, right? And what would you want us to do for each of those 50? Let's say there are 30 of them over $100,000. Skyward as an example, Infinite Campus as an example, some of our other technology vendors. Would you want us to have legal counsel review the contract, number one? Would you like to have us bring the actual contract to you for approval? We could bring action to you saying, give us authority to sign a contract with, like we talked about earlier, and then we include the contract in board book. I know exactly what you're after, and accountability is important, and it's important to me also. But we also don't want to be overly cumbersome, and to your point, always be coming to the board with maybe some simple contracts that are renewed and hardly changed, or quickly negotiated and renewed. So therein lies the trick. Which
And it
ones?
would be helpful to have your advice on that, because you're gonna know those kinds of things more than we would. You know, what's out of the ordinary, because we don't wanna pay an attorney to review every single one of those either. So I think you're gonna be in a better position to say, you know, we've got 70 of these, we've got 1 or 2 of these that happen a year, these are the ones you're probably looking for.
Infinite Campus is a perfect example. Skyward, frontline education, some of these services that, I don't wanna say they're sole source, but we're really in a spot where they're sole source. We're not gonna change Skyward for finance. 90% of the state of Wisconsin has finance Skyward, right? We negotiate with them. We do our best. We do have a contract with them. It's probably not something you would be interested in seeing, but at the same time, Nexus Solutions, right? That's a contract you're gonna see in 2 weeks. That's one you should see.
Is Skyward a annual contract or multi-year,
Probably multi-year.
and maybe, I don't know, if some of the language that we could review and some of the recommendations of language would be more kind of new contracts, not contracts that we're already engaged in per se,
Yeah.
right, you know?
Yeah, you may wanna think about something for evergreen contracts, you know, but I would agree with that. Those that are sizable and new,
Yep.
sizable TBD.
Right. And being totally honest with the rest of the world and the 9 of you here, or 8 of you here, sometimes we want to bring contracts to the board because you have some authority we don't have, and it's part of the negotiations process. Gonna have to take that to the board, we'll see what they say about it, type of strategy. And sometimes, even if it isn't required by policy, or you didn't ask for it, I might use that as part of negotiation strategy, bringing something to you and talking about it in public, and that sometimes is part of negotiations.
You know, since you're talking about the real big one, Skyward, because it's taking care of finances, and that is what the majority of the state of Wisconsin works with, it is always a good practice to always have a competitor to compare to. And I think by bringing it to the board every once in a while, because I think the contract is a multi-year contract, if I'm not mistaken, looking back with Skyward. But it is interesting, not only for that one, but then Infinite Campus, your school, your student tracker. That's sometimes, you want to take a look at, you know, and that's a good idea. But I don't know if we want to do that every year or whatever. So I throw that out there, that it's not a bad idea to have competitors every once in a while coming in and giving us some bids so that the people we are with stay competitive.
So you can look at the template, yeah.
You guys wanna come back with some things what I'm hearing?
The board's interested, that's,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yes, I think so. All right, good idea.
Thanks, Bob.
Thank you. Agenda item number 9, class evacuation policy. Again, agenda item 9 is a discussion for the board, and so I'm going to open that up to a discussion with the board to have the administration give us some information about evacuation process, protocol, and what you're looking for and what you're looking at when we evacuate.
I'll kick this one out too.
Okay.
Dr. Hiltz and I have gone back and forth exchanging some thoughts, definitions, various inputs regarding this. And the feedback that I've heard, in fact, I think we've heard it from our speaker who was here earlier, the board has received emails this school year from some concerned parents regarding how the district handles disruptions. And the examples that I've heard and seen, I believe, have all been elementary schools. But the questions that have been raised is, well, how do we approach these situations? What's our going in assumption in terms of how are we going to manage those? And I've heard, and again, this is hearsay, we've gotten different, different types of feedback depending on who we were hearing from. My question or my concern is that I think, and I believe, 4 or 5 years ago, Dr. Hills, when you started, this was one of the questions we asked you during the interview, right, was, how would you handle these? And it feels to me like we've gotten away from making sure that we are removing the distraction in the classroom, and so we can continue on with the education of the students that are there. We have examples of classrooms being evacuated because of one disruptive student. That classroom goes into the other second grade classroom, and then you have 2 classrooms disrupted for a time being. So I would like to see, and I understand that there's laws and all kinds of stuff around this, but I would just like to see something, I guess, formalized to the extent that we can, that our going in position or our assumption is that we're going to do everything we can to maintain those classroom atmospheres for the majority of the students and not disrupt their day, be it in a classroom. I know it's happened in libraries and other situations. So I didn't know if policy is the right word. I understand, again, that there's a lot of factors that go into it, but just a reiteration and recognition that we would want to support, and this is a question for the rest of the board too, right? I mean, is that something we want to be about, or do we want to go a different direction?
Could I respond to that? Yeah. So obviously, student discipline and evacuating classrooms is a very emotional topic, very emotional situation for anybody who's experienced it or parents who hear about it. So I think this is a healthy conversation. And if it's okay with the board, I would like to ask Mrs. Cartledge and Mrs. Shell to come up and give some background information on how we use evacuations, how we prevent evacuations. Would that be of interest? Would you mind? Thank you. We've had a number of conversations now about these situations, and I think our, clearly, it's funny, we start the whole board meeting with safety and security, and that is always first and foremost, right? And so, as it is here. So, if you wouldn't mind kind of taking over, give us a little background.
I can give a little background. I can give a little background. Just don't have my loud voice on. So, just thinking about classroom evacuations in general, they're used to preserve safety and dignity and learning. So I think one of the important things to understand is that classroom evacuations, there's a lot of space in between a disruptive behavior and when we might have to evacuate the classroom and when we might have to intervene in different ways as staff. And so a lot of times our classroom evacuation may be a part of a student's plan or a part of a classroom plan to address a behavior before it occurs so that we don't have a crisis with the kids in the classroom. And it also allows staff a little bit of space to intervene however that might be. Classroom evacuations might also be used in health or medical situations. They might be used if there's a malfunction in the classroom. But we do serve students who have health issues, mental health issues, and special education needs that sometimes manifest themselves in behaviors that can be disruptive. Our job is to plan ahead. And so in those spaces, we would have things like safety plans or behavior intervention plans that might include classroom evacuation as a very last resort, but looking at offering alternatives, additional space, additional staffing in the room, reducing demands. There's a variety of things that can be done, and every student is unique and every classroom is unique in what they need to plan for. So I don't know if that helps. From the understanding of those
The example that you gave, it sounds like in a situation you could have a student whose plan includes evacuating the classroom before they reach a certain level, correct? So in that instance, why don't we turn that around and remove that student from the classroom and keep the rest of the kids there?
So can you help me understand what you mean by remove?
So if I understood you correctly, we have 20 kids in a classroom. One of them has an IEP plan or behavior plan or whatever it is that says, before Johnny gets to this point with his behavior, we're going to evacuate the classroom, the other 19 kids, and we're gonna leave Johnny in that classroom. So my question is, in those situations, if you can tell Johnny's escalating, why don't we remove him and leave the other 19 in the room to continue their learning day?
Well, and within those plans, there are often multiple strategies to get the student to leave on their own, or before we're to that
Okay.
space where the student's in the room and we recognize we aren't going to be able to get them to leave voluntarily, and we're just gonna move the rest of the students into an alternate location so that they can continue learning or resume learning, with the understanding that if they all remain there together, or if we try to engage with a student who's refusing to move, we're still gonna be taking away from that instructional time. If that makes sense? And then, at that point, I mean, if those pieces are happening, that's a signal to the adults that we need to work out a different plan, that
Yeah,
once
and
that
maybe
moves
that's,
through,
maybe that's what I'm trying to get at, just not articulating well. To me, the plan, step 3 on the plan should be remove the student, not remove the class from, the other kids from there.
Sure, and
That should come before step 7, right, of remove the rest of the classroom.
Mhm.
And I think speaking from experience, as a principal for many years here, that really is the first line of defense, is as you can see a child escalating, whether they have an IEP or not. You're working with individuals who and patterns of behavior that have worked for the student. Sometimes it's the principal walks in, that's a trigger. Sometimes the counselor walks in, it's a trigger, depending on prior experiences or even what happened in that current day. So absolutely that space, as Wendy has mentioned, in between when we start to see something starting, the brewing's happening, and that space of, really disruptive or dangerous behavior. One of those, there's many, many things to try, and of course, trying to exit, the student with dignity and respect and in a way that they would voluntarily leave is always first line of defense. As that many children, will want to engage further, and part of that engagement becomes increasingly helping that behavior. So I think, just speaking from experience, if there are tools and strategies that we work at, to try to keep the student in the room, because that is our first and foremost, is keep them in there and learning, right? And try to distract, avoid, change their mindset, all those kinds of things, calm them down, all those interesting things that help us keep that student learning in the classroom, that's first and foremost. But as those tools and strategies, may or may not manifest in greater behavior, then the attempt would always be to try, and some students will gladly go take a walk and take a break, do some restitution. They like to do jobs and have empowerment and work with all kinds of staff at the school. And some, that's a more difficult choice even on a given day. So I think, she mentioned, as Wendy mentioned, that space, that needing to, as you see things and learn students' patterns and behaviors, you work through plans and communication tools with teachers to try and work through those tools and strategies prior to an evacuation.
Do we document every instance of in the classroom evacuation? Like, do we know how many times that happened at Jones last year?
I don't know that we would be documenting from a building level, but for our students who do require those additional plans in order to be successful, we would have that information. And again, because the team is looking at that information to say, is this plan working? If we were having to move to that space where we are asking the other students to leave, that's a signal to us to say we need to get our IEP team together, our student assistance team back together, and come up with a different plan. We don't want that to be a part of the plan that's used regularly. That's when none of the other steps have worked, and it allows us to manage that situation and maintain a learning environment for other students who might be disrupted if they have to leave, but might be further disrupted if they were to see an adult and a student engage any further when we're not seeing a de-escalation. So kind of thinking about it in those terms.
Is that data that we could track going forward?
Probably, we would, it would just require the classroom teacher to note it in the student's behavior record. So I suppose we could, yeah.
Yes, we would have that. I mean, our teams that gather around kids who need additional levels of support do track that information. And so if it were happening more than once, it would signal the adult that, hey, our plan isn't working. We need to regroup. We need to figure something else out.
Maybe you're not tracking every single event, but I think what your concern is, and I think mine as well, is full evacuations.
Right.
And it's certainly not just that, but multiple ones that are extremely disruptive. And it sounds like you guys have a plan that, you know, is preventing us from getting to that point, and then if it does happen, and it's happening often, that something's gotta change there. So I was curious about the frequency as well. You know, are we talking these several handful of instances, or is it dozens and dozens? And I don't think it sounds like it's dozens and dozens, but.
Right, and that's where, I mean, just, we get feedback from parents that say this is happening weekly, or this is happening monthly. I have nothing to respond with, you know, other than, okay, I believe you, but then, you know, it would just be nice to have something grounded in fact, to say, well, that's not what our data shows, if it comes to that at some point in the future.
And that can all change with our enrollments, because it's very student specific, or sometimes environment specific, so.
You know, as I'm listening to this, you know, I find myself going to, you know, so, you know, if a student starts to misbehave, we have a plan, hopefully. Sometimes it happens out of the blue, but we have a plan. Teacher has been trained, you know, we have our new bridge room coordinators, and so sometimes we ask the student, you know, to go to the bridge room. Sometimes we have a pupil services staff person who might come, and that person, and the student knows, when that person shows up, my job is to go with them, right? Or the principal, as Mrs. Shell. So we've got a lot of those plans in place. If the student chooses not to, or is unable, is probably the more appropriate language, that student is unable to execute the plan, and we end up with a choice with removing the students and leaving the misbehaving child behind, or having somebody lay hands on that student and forcibly remove them from the classroom in front of the other students, I would choose to remove the classroom, because I think the forcible removal of a student would be traumatic as traumatic, if not more so, for everybody. So that's, after all of those other steps, that's kind of the decision we're left with. So I don't know if that adds any valuable perspective to this conversation or not.
Yeah, that relates to what I was going to bring up earlier, and that's, I agree with the problem that we're discussing, which is distractions within the classroom, which happen too often. And if 20 kids are taken out of the class, they're distracted from learning. During the behavior that led up to it, they were distracted. Then they're not learning at all when they're taken out, and then we can say we're getting them to a different spot to start learning again, but it's probably not until they get back into the classroom. But I don't know what the answer to that is, because I think our teachers, frankly, are at risk of injury too often already. I think we already expect too much of our teachers when it comes to students who are out of control, and so I wouldn't want to change our evacuation policy to require our teachers to, you know, tackle the out of control fourth grader and drag him out of the room, risking injury to the teacher as well as the student. And then, so I don't think it's a problem with the evacuation policy. I think we need to look at, do we have students that are repeatedly showing they aren't successful in that classroom with whatever services we're providing. So either we need more services for those students while they're in the general ed classroom, or they need to spend more time in a different classroom, which I know is a very touchy subject. But if the student is causing the whole class to be evacuated, it means that student also isn't in the environment that they're most successful in, because they're not succeeding then. So I think it has more to do with that side of the equation than it does with the evacuation policy side of the equation.
And when you say that side of the, I'm sorry, just to clarify, so you're saying when these behaviors are occurring and we're evacuating, it really then lies on the adults to recognize that and say, this plan isn't working, redo the plan.
Yeah, my understanding is 99.9 whatever percent of the time when a class is evacuated, it's because there's a student who is at risk of hurting themselves or someone in the classroom. They're not just being disruptive. They're like at the point of flipping things over, or maybe they're already doing it, so you're pulling the kids out. So the evacuation policy isn't the problem. The problem is that the first time that's happened this year for that student, or is that the 10th time that's happened this year for that student? Because if it's the 10th time, it shouldn't have happened the 9th time, or even the 7th time, because something should have changed before that, so the student wasn't in that situation anymore, because they've proven not to be successful. So I'm in the same boat though as Pat is, when I get the call that says it was the 10th time, I don't know if it was, and I can't find out if it was because you couldn't tell me
Right.
if it was. I can't call you up and say, I heard from this parent that this student in this classroom did this, and you'd say, well, I can't tell you that, so that's why I want to call you and
Right.
ask you that. But,
Right.
but those are the calls we get, and so I don't know. Did it really happen 10 times this semester already? Because if it did, that's a problem. It's not an evacuation policy problem, it's a whatever's happening for that student is not working problem.
I have a question. Now, for these students that have these disruptive behaviors, are the parents contacted? Is there something that's worked out with the parent, the student, and the teacher, where they're able to work something out where that doesn't happen, or there's a plan that they all work on together?
Absolutely, yeah, parents are certainly involved in any student who has any kind of repeated behaviors, but even if it's a one-time thing and then we end up evacuating, yeah, we contact parents and work cooperatively with them.
It just seems to me that there's so many variables here. There's the teacher and whoever the adults are in the classroom, there's the student, there's the context of the situation. Now, all those variables may change. The thing is that if you don't identify the potential escalation early and deal with it, then what's going to happen is that you run the risk of it escalating further to a place of violence. And there's so many triggers that could be there. I mean, a child may come in whose parent died the night, or grandparent died the night before or something. So there's so many variables that you're having to deal with all the time. And I just have great respect for teachers that have to deal with this. And I also know, though, that there are some teachers that do not deal well with escalations and do not have the same kinds of respect. And there are situations where subs are coming in. There's multiple variables that you're dealing with, and it's a matter of really being able to identify early and have some action plans.
Are other parents notified of a evacuation? I guess maybe more importantly in an event where there were maybe some physical situations occurring, just so that I guess as a parent of young students, I'd probably want to know maybe what happened, and especially from an adult rather than my child who's playing phone tag and might not get all the details correct.
The confidentiality really restricts what we're able to share. And I know it's frustrating for parents and board members as well.
I don't know if I have questions, but maybe rhetorical questions. Obviously, I'm concerned about substitute teachers, when subs come in, and students that are on behavioral plans, things in that fashion. Are we, and this might be rhetorical, are we making sure that the substitute teachers are aware of these situations that might happen, so that they're not surprised? Pretty much, are those available?
When we have, should I try this? Sure. From my experience here in the district, when we know that we're going to have a substitute teacher, in most cases, if we're serving students or the classroom teacher in charge of their students knows they have a child who may have a plan or some specialized instructions, that information would be communicated. And then easily read plan would be available for that adult coming in to be a part of that learning community.
That's good to know. Are all of our teachers trained CPI?
I think not all. I want to say I'm thinking of a board.
Paras are,
Yep, we have trained by building, I wanna say last year, the total folks who had been trained were 231 staff had been trained in CPI, and then we're still looking at that. And the year prior, so that would have been 18, 19, I think it was 190 something staff were trained. We're currently shifting gears and moving to the PROACT framework. And that framework provides more of a foundational set of skills and supports for staff as they move into these, to kind of piggyback off what Lee had said, so that we understand situations hopefully well before they start and are able to identify triggers and alternatives for that child before we get to the stage where there is a disruption or behaviors that have manifested themselves.
and there's a different philosophy with CPI training and who should restrain and who shouldn't restrain and things of that fashion. I understand that, but I'm always aware of that because that can become a legal problem if somebody has not been trained in CPI and they restrain a student inappropriately, which can be dangerous as well. So I just throw that out for a part of the discussion so that we all know that that's a tough place to be. Any other questions?
No, and I guess it's not, like I said, it's not a policy change, as long as we can assure parents that we are aggressively managing those situations where we want to maximize in-classroom learning and minimize, those scenarios in which all the kids are impacted. Our philosophy is still that, because sometimes I know pendulums swing from one way to the other depending on leadership and what have you. So as long as we are doing that, then we'll continue down that path.
Yeah, and we prioritize prevention, absolutely. So, and I will share, this is a frustrating topic across the state. I talked to other educators, and this is, some kids, they have some trouble regulating, right? And it's public schools, it's private schools, and it's just a part of our society. And so I know it's very frustrating, and I do want to commend, like you say, our staff and Wendy and Julie and getting people trained, putting the plans together, communicating with the parents. I mean, it's a heavy lift to try and manage these. And at the same time, our priority in terms of prevention is to try and give that kid some skills, right? To self-identify, to self-regulate, know where they can go to get help, and that just helps them be successful, beyond school as well. And somebody mentioned the fact that it's mainly elementary. I can't recall the last time we did a middle or high school class. I don't think we have we? So yeah, it's a younger child, situation where they just can't regulate very well. So yeah. All right.
Well, if there are no other questions, then there's no policy that we need to deal with. Thank you for the information.
Thank you.
We greatly appreciate that. Agenda item 10, the USDA paid lunch equity tool was used to determine the new weighted pricing average for the 22-23 school year. This weighted average is used as the guide for WSD Nutrition Services Department to update meal pricing for the upcoming 22-23 school year. In addition, the Wisconsin Adult Meal Price Circulation Guidelines provided by the DPI was used to update adult meal pricing utilizing the Pricing School Food Authority option of the Wisconsin DPI pricing tool. Attached, you will find a list of all prices for WSD. There we go.
How do you like all that?
I got through it.
Very good. So I'm Karen Fox. I'm the Director of School Nutrition for our school district. And it took a while for the USDA to come out with the paid lunch equity tool this year, because there was so much deliberation about, are meals going to be free, are they going to be paid? So last Friday, there was some legislation, and what they have agreed upon is that we will be, we're gonna go back to a paid meal system. Therefore, we need to establish some paid meal pricing. We will once again go back to requiring meal applications to be filled out by parents. So that's gonna be the most difficult task that I foresee, because we really need to capture the families with the reduced, that are gonna be falling into that category, because those are the working families that we really wanna target. So that being said, this is the recommendation based on our paid lunch equity tool put out by the USDA. The breakfast prices, the range in increase, so elementary breakfast increased 15 cents. The middle school increased 20 cents and the high school 35 cents. Lunch pricing, the elementary increased 60 cents. Middle school 35 cents and the high school 30 cents. We continue to see huge food supply chain disruptions. You know, it's trucking, it's labor, it's fuel. All of these things are adding costs to us. We continue to provide multiple menu choices despite all of these things happening. So I'm proud of our crew. And so we did what we could, and now we, of course, have to go back to paid meals. So this is the recommendation for the next school year, unless something would happen to change, which has happened to us before.
The legislature is still arguing about it.
They
This
are.
week, as a matter of fact, so this would be in preparation for if they don't change and agree to provide free lunches again for one more year. And it's also noted the large changes you mentioned are not year-over-year changes.
No.
That's compared to 3 years ago.
Right.
So they do appear steep, but it's compared to 3 years ago in a time of inflation, steep inflation, so.
Yeah.
And this paid lunch equity tool that Karen references, that's a tool we need to use. We're
All the
required to
directors,
use it
yeah.
by DPI, so. That's why when we bring this to you, we don't bring it to you for action. It's more of an update, so you know what we're doing with our paid lunch prices.
Is it still the case then, and maybe this is for new board members as much as anything, that the tool is used and we're really required to do these updates, these increases, because otherwise our free and reduced students would be seen as subsidizing the other students, so we don't have a choice, frankly.
That's the reasoning behind that tool. So any of the free and reduced meal reimbursements that we get cannot subsidize those paid meals. So that's the reason why we have to have this tool. So.
Karen, I just want to say thank you to you and your team with all the challenges that you guys have faced. I think there's a number of unsung heroes in the district. I'd say that you and your team are definitely one of those. To come through what you have with all the supply chain disruptions, the labor issues, you name it, I continue to get great feedback about the food services. So, job well done. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate that, and I'll pass that on.
Please
They will
do.
love to hear that. Thank you. Anything else?
Just a big thank you.
Oh, thanks. Make me cry.
Well, it's very important, we all need to eat, so.
Yes, we do, especially those kiddos.
Okay, next agenda item. Dr. Rauscher will present 2022-23 Wausau School District Activities Code of Conduct, which will be used at East and West high schools.
Yes. Hello, everybody. This is an annual item. Just a little bit of background. Throughout the year, each year, our activities directors keep track of how the handbook is used and pay attention if there's anything that we could do differently, do better, any adjustments we could make, and then we bring it to you each summer before it's issued to families and students again in the fall. So a couple notes this year. Our goal overall is really to make sure we're improving, always improving our student experiences and our families' experiences. You'll hear that in a lot of the things that we talk about, and this is another good example. Just a fun piece this year. In the spirit of collaboration, you have one document with 2 logos. So, as we've had activities directors change, we said, why do we have 2 documents that are exactly the same? Can't we just come together, do this work together, and put both logos on one document? We said, great idea. So, good example of collaboration. And otherwise, really just the few changes that are here are really about clarifying language, adding updates. I'll give you just a simple example, there aren't very many. But there was a section under Conduct Rule C, where in the old activities code, there were 6 bullet points, but number 6 was huge. It was 3 things in one. So in looking at it for clarity for our students, for our families, for everybody that has to implement it, let's make that 6 and 7 and 8, just to be clear. So it's really just very subtle changes like that. So I would ask that you go through the process of approving, and certainly happy to answer questions you have.
Okay. I'm seeking a motion to recommend to the full board the approval of the Wausau School District Athletic and Activities Code of Conduct as presented.
So moved.
Second.
And questions? If not, we've seen a couple people, but I think we can take a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion so moved. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm just gonna sit tight.
You're just gonna sit
My
right
notes.
there? Okay, good, thank you. The education team will present the 2022-23 district academic standards in math, English, language, arts, science, and social studies, linked to the DPI.
And again, this is one of those annual items, if you're on the board for a long time, we'll get very used to. Fortunately, we have a lot of support in the state with academic standards, and so there was a link in the agenda background that gives you kind of the why behind why we have standards, how do they work, what are they good for, and then you can drill into the specific standards as well on that website. So if you want to look specifically at ELA standards, or specifically at science standards, for example, you can link there. The most important thing the standards do is help guide for us one common target about what is it that we want our students to know and be able to do, not only when they're done with K-12 education, but kind of benchmark along the way. What would it look like at kindergarten? What does success look like as you move to first grade, and so on all the way through? So we would just ask that you approve these so that we can continue to guide our work each year.
I'm seeking a motion to recommend to the full board the approval of the 2022-23 district academic standards in math, English, language arts, science, and social studies.
Second.
Questions? Any questions about this? If not, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion so carries. Thank you very much. And you just stay right there.
I'm not going anywhere.
Dr. Rusher will share background information related to weighted grades and/or body systems in response to questions raised at the last board meeting.
Yes, at the last meeting, we were talking about redefining READY, some of those indicators that are based on national research and then also adapted throughout the state and now adapted locally to help us give a sense of how are we doing, and for students to know how are they doing in terms of preparing themselves for college and career and really and for life in general after high school. So one of the questions that came up as a result of that is, would it be valuable to look at a weighted grade system? And there are also variations on that, the Laude system that many universities use and some high schools use, and some schools use a combination of the two. So that's where this background comes from. So really looking at as I understood the questions at our last meeting, the goal is to encourage our students to pursue rigorous courses. And that would certainly include courses in traditional areas like math and English and so on, but also all of our career pathway courses. And the rationale behind that is some of the research that suggests students who engage in rigorous courses and are successful in them tend to be better prepared for whatever they do after their K-12 education. So easy to support that goal and that reasoning. But as we started to investigate a little bit, a lot of questions come up about how do we pursue that goal? And this is some of the background. Just questions like, well, how many of our students currently pursue rigorous courses, including those career pathway courses that help them to be successful? what motivates our students to pursue those courses? And to find that out, we would really need to talk with our students. What barriers might prevent students from pursuing these courses? I think we were kind of hypothesizing that maybe a concern over lowering a GPA could be a factor, but I don't know that we know that for sure. And then ultimately, how might implementing weighted grades or a Latte system positively or negatively impact student experiences? And I would say that's really about their experiences during school, but also after school, as they move to post-secondary life. So when you look at all those questions, it's really a pretty complex issue. When I looked at what other districts have done in terms of moving to this, many of them have involved a lot of different stakeholders. So that would be a challenge of taking this on now in the summer. I am here, our principals are here, our teachers aren't necessarily accessible in the same way as they would be during the school year, and neither are our students or our families, and we'd certainly want them to be part of the decision, as well as people like our post-secondary partners, possibly our employers. We'd certainly want our school counselors involved as they do advising and all those kinds of things. And then there's a lot of areas of potential impact that, again, you can see in the background there. And if you look, many of those are very high stakes areas, or have the potential to be very high stakes areas for our students and their families. So you talk about things like official transcripts and making sure that those are accurate and reflect what we want them to reflect. College admissions decisions, scholarships decisions, those are all big impact pieces for our students and families. Things like course selection and scheduling and staffing, big impact for our staff and for our systems. And then there's a lot of other additional considerations on there. What type of system do you use? Do you go with a weighted system? Do you go with a Latte system? Do you go with a combination? And I have yet to find 2 schools that do it exactly the same. In my little bit of research, just to get ready for tonight, it looks like most schools and most districts really have done a variety of research, involved a variety of people, and then picked something that fits their specific community and their specific goals. We would have a lot of work to do in terms of identifying courses. Any of you who are aware of the subcommittee work, everybody in the room certainly, but thinking about the public knows that we don't necessarily offer the same courses at all of our high schools, and how might that impact these decisions? I'd mentioned accuracy. Communicating with our students and families, I think, is huge. Partly getting their voices involved in any decision making, but then also making sure that they understand the impact of any decision so that that can guide their choices as they go through the high school experience. So with all of that there, and there's additional information in the background on some of the research specifically, our recommendation at this point is if the board wants us to pursue this and try to answer some of these questions and possibly create a system, it would be to wait at least until the fall when we convene a committee that would have all those stakeholders there, allow us to do that work, and then look at it, bring that committee's work back to you and say, here's what we found, here's what we think fits our community, and then from there look at a phased-in implementation. That's a lot of information quickly. Certainly welcome questions.
And I would think this would be a good time to ask those questions, so.
So this is my fault, because I brought this up. And I started thinking about it in years past at graduations, basically seeing students listed in the program as having AP or IB, not being recognized as 4.0. I was wondering, I wonder if some of those students aren't being recognized as a 4.0 because they got a B in an AP chemistry class or something. And then on the reverse side of that, seeing some of the students being recognized as 4.0, I was thinking to myself, I wonder if any of those students elected not to take an AP or an IB class because they were afraid of what it would do to their 4.0. And that goes for students who don't have 4.0s as well. Because getting an A in an AP or an IB class is much more difficult than in a standard class. So that's something I've been thinking about for a long time, and then when we had the presentation at the last meeting talking about how good it is to take those classes, that just made me bring it up the last time. So I'm not opposed to a study like this. My initial reaction is I like the 4.0 system, but I'm not opposed to a study like this, but at the risk of revealing my ignorance, I'm still struggling to to figure out why there would be a problem with saying, for now going forward, if you get a B in an AP or an IB class, we're gonna treat that as an A for your GPA, to reward students that take those classes and encourage more students to take those classes, and to recognize the reality that getting that B in that AP class is probably just as difficult or more difficult than the student who got the A in the standard class. And like I said, I'm willing to listen to why my ignorance is blinding me from why that would be a big problem with adding, knowing that grades come in like January, and that wouldn't prevent us from making other changes down the road. So tell me why I don't know anything.
We would never say that.
You can,
No,
it's okay.
No. So, I would share with the board, I had the opportunity to go through shifting to a weighted grade system in a previous district. And I was surprised at the amount of emotion and angst from parents, from students, and from staff. So let's just start with the first situation. Let's just say, okay, if you get a B in an AP or IB course, we will call that a 4.0. There are other I would disagree with one of your initial statements that earning an A in an AP class is more challenging than a regular class. Not always the case. I know in our previous district we had some very high level career and tech ed classes that, as we examined, certainly were as rigorous or more so than some AP classes, right? Even within AP classes, there are different levels of rigor, different pass rates, all sorts of things. So one thing is I would have a hard time limiting it to AP and IB. You also send a message to your staff about the rigor, which can be translated into quality sometimes of their coursework. There would be a number of staff, I think, who would say, I can put my class up against an AP or an IB class, and it should also be weighted. So, I mean, that's just one example. One other one I'll share, and we can certainly, I can stop and we can discuss. We ended up making when we implemented it, we started with incoming freshmen, and I think I may have mentioned this at the last meeting. Students and parents mainly were very upset at the idea of changing the rules midstream. You know, Dr. Rauscher mentioned a few important measures on here, like class rank, GPA, you know, those kinds of things, and people were, particularly people who were interested in GPAs, were very concerned about shifting those rules in the middle. So some of that's just feedback from the process, you know, that I happen to go through, just to kind of.
Yeah, and I want to make sure I clarify my statement. I'm referring, when I say that the AP class, it's harder to get an A in that class than this, I'm referring to the AP version of the standard class. If the standard class takes the same amount of study and time and rigor and is just as difficult as the AP, then we got a problem. Then those kids should be getting AP. So I'm referring to the student who chooses to take the AP version of a class that could be taken as the standard class. And I understand that it would take a study like this to find the other types of classes that are like AP classes and like IB classes that also should be given the weighted grading. And I just use AP and IB because that's the easy one to identify, because the whole purpose of those classes is to go further than the standard class. It takes more study time, it's more rigorous, that's the purpose of the class. So that's what I meant in terms of identifying those as easy targets, so to speak.
Just another example of why it's important to take some time and look at weighted versus Lot-A versus combination systems. Having a recent graduate who spent a good chunk of time last year on things like college admissions and scholarship admissions, I mentioned this to her, and she said, weighted grades, that's crazy. Every application I filled out said, give me your unweighted GPA. And I was like, oh, well, I didn't know that, she was handling her business, but I thought that's a piece I would like to learn more about, and maybe reach out to some of our post-secondary partners and say, how does this factor in, or some of our scholarship people, because if we're doing it only for kids to have to undo it, or now we're running two systems, and maybe is there a better way to encourage students to take those rigorous classes than just saying we will change the GPA piece? Are there other ways to get kids to pursue the learning and all the skills they're gonna get? And I don't know that this isn't the right way, but it's just, there are questions like that maybe it's not as simple, potentially, that I would wanna make sure the impact is positive.
Karen, you have a question, go ahead.
Yeah, well, I wanted to say I totally support this change, having my own academic experience with a weighted system, way more years ago than I want to tell. And now walking 4 students through this high school process, I have observed students not taking the AP courses for that very reason that you spoke of, Lance, for sure. And when we choose this as an indicator that leads to greater success if they put themselves in a place where they are experiencing that greater rigor, but they choose not to because it will ruin their GPA, or their valedictorian potential status, we're not really truly providing a pathway to meet those indicators. So I think that reward is necessary, but I also do appreciate, though it won't help my own personal students, that you can't start midway through. Because what happens is, especially from a class rank standpoint, it's not just a student being rewarded in an AP class, it's the student who didn't take the AP class whose grade point now will be with an A. If they both get A's, the AP A is worth more than the regular A, because it's typically 4.3 for the AP A and 4.0 for the regular classroom A, and all of a sudden class rank just changed for a student who chose not to take AP. And so if that understanding isn't early on in the process, that's a real, because some of those pathways have been established way back when they were freshmen. And so I can appreciate that that would be a really difficult thing to kind of upend in the middle. So I do appreciate that that is the way it would need to be done, and that there needs to be a good look at what other things in addition to what we have from an AP standpoint. But I think it's really important. It's true that there is, every application does say that. I've seen that all over the place too, but it still will have an accurate class rank. That doesn't change. So the unweighting is often asked for on college applications, for sure, but the class rank really is indicative of your true pathway of rigor and how that grade point reflected it. That doesn't change. Whereas, someone who took no AP courses but maintained a valedictorian status, and someone who took all AP courses and maintained a valedictorian status, those would be very different class ranks at the end of a weighted system.
Right, but now they're not.
Right. And so that's what needs to change. It does need to change. But it wouldn't when you said, oh, well, they often on applications ask for unweighted grade points. That's true. But they also ask for your class rank. They see that on your transcript, and they also see what classes you're taking, and they also know what classes are offered at the school. So they know, even if you are a 4-point student, at least a lot of the applications that I've seen now 2 rounds through, they know what your high school offers and what you chose to take. So there is some knowledge in those applications of whether they know what, if you took the most rigorous classes offered, whatever. So those are just my thoughts on it, but I absolutely support a move in this direction because I think it will help to promote students to take the most rigorous, challenging coursework in a place where it's really free, offered to them. I mean, there's so many opportunities in high school that they if they feel successful in it here, they'll be more likely to challenge themselves in a post-high school setting. So I really support this move.
Other questions?
I guess I'd just be curious on, and I know you don't have any of the data right now, but I get concerned about potentially watering something down, you know, and that kind of grading system. I can see some benefit, but I also see, I mean, the point of the course is that it is a challenging course to get those grades. And so I guess I'd just be curious what studies, what information would show pros and cons to both systems.
And as I said, there are a variety of different systems. Some combine the weighting with a Laude. Sometimes the Laude is just based on a separate system of points that you earn. So if you take a year-long AP class, that might be worth a full point. A semester class that was designated a Laude class might be half a point. The district I worked in before coming here, they did all the work the year before I arrived, and then it was my job to implement. That was interesting. It was absolutely the right thing to do. The implementation was not great because it was not phased. So I spent a lot of time with very upset seniors and their families that first year. I'd be happy to write a letter to your school. You can still get a scholarship. Please don't panic. I'm sorry you're not going to get a medal at graduation. That went away, but I didn't make that. There was just a variety of things that were hard. But anyway, the system that was selected there looked at GPA and the rigorous courses, and there was a multiplier. So your GPA was multiplied by the number of rigorous course points you had, and then there were 3 ranges. If you're cum laude, magna cum laude, or summa cum laude. And so then I would find myself writing letters of recommendation that said, so-and-so has a 4.0 and has taken all these rigorous classes and is on track to graduate with this distinction. Which, that was fine, it made it easy to write letters. But the changing without the planning was much more difficult on families than was anticipated, even though they had done a lot of community meetings and family meetings along the way.
That can cause problems. Other questions? I think it's always a good idea to take a look at it. Throughout my 40-some years, I've been on both sides. And I've been there, I've seen it, we've implemented, we haven't implemented. I do have one question, though. When we get to our valedictorian choice, is there a way in which our schools, our high schools, identify a student that is going to be the valedictorian based on the number of classes that he has taken, let it be, or she has taken, let it be AP or IB? Does that play a part in identifying, or as might have been done, where a person is put into a situation where they haven't taken any AP or IB, and they are then a valedictorian? That I can see where there can be great problems there too, because of the rigor that's in AP and IB. So I'm asking, do the principals look at those things to identify the 5 that had a 4-point and 1 had 17 AP classes or IB classes, and it goes right down the list, and of those 5, only 1's going to be the valedictorian, that one that took all those AP or IB classes?
In terms of just our general school recognition, no, but you might be thinking about Wisconsin's Academic Excellence Scholarship, which is actually controlled by statute initially.
Correct.
You have to look at GPA first, that has to be your first indicator. And then we have a decision as a district level, and this is one of our Neola policies, where then you decide what the tiebreakers are. So a lot of times it's ACT, some schools break it down to your highest ACT sub-score, some look at courses you've taken, there's a variety of things. Most of them end in, and if there's still a tie, you flip a coin or do a random drawing. Again, in the district I was in with the Laude system, Laude was was the next indicator. So GPA had to be first, but if you had, like I said, if you had several 4.0s or 3.9999s, whatever your highest were, then we went to your law 8 points was the next breaker, and then ACT was farther
And
along. But
that's
those
what
can
I
be
was-
local decisions.
And that's sort of what I was referring to, is we have 20 valedictorians stand on stage. And that's why I was thinking to myself, how many of them took some AP classes? How many took 0 AP classes? How many students are sitting in the audience right now because they got 1 B on 1 AP class, and there's a student up there that didn't take 1 single AP class? And that's, I don't want to say it's unfair, because I don't want to take anything away from someone who got a 4.0 without taking any AP classes, because I didn't get a 4.0. So I think that's amazing, but, you know, it just brought those questions up.
And this is why it's a good discussion, and why I've flipped from both sides and been in the situation, one that you just identified. So I think, am I hearing the board and at least pursuing and taking a look at what would be good for the Wausau School District and our students and families to move ahead and then evaluate this? So you're getting a nod. I don't think we need a motion for this.
I don't know that it has to be either. I think there was a request that it be an action item, so we came up with a recommended motion. I'm also okay with just saying, get the team together when everybody's back and start working on this.
I would suggest that.
Can I just
Yes.
ask, what would you anticipate would be the time frame? Like, if you wanna meet and discuss with all of the, you know, stakeholders in it by the following, you know, or incoming freshmen who are registering that February, it would be able to be in place?
That would be
The soonest.
ideal, right?
Ideal.
If we knew relatively quickly that we wanted to move, then to have that system in place so that when families are making those decisions, they know. The other thing we can do immediately, and I think plan to regardless, is start sharing some of the redefining ready indicator information with kids and families. And that'll just be part of that ACP process, and you're familiar with the study that WIPS helped us to do. You know, families said, help us, give us more information, help us make decisions that are really well informed, so we can start doing that immediately.
I think that's a good question, Ms. Vandenberg, the fact that, you know, the starting date and then rolling it in, because people do need to know the process. You don't want to have goalposts changed and moved around as we're going through that, like you had pointed out, so, all right. So, let it be done.
Thank you.
Let it be done. And with that, I'm seeking a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, everyone.
Yeah.
What do you second on that one?